Sip of South America returns to City Winery this year on Monday, June 9th from 6 to 9 p.m. Discover, learn about, and taste wines representing the varied terroirs of South America. All wines served scored 90 plus points or has received a Best Buy designation given by the most respected palates in wine. South America-inspired cuisine by Chef Camilla Rinaldi of Resident, and live entertainment will keep you going all night long as you sip the night away.
Hi, I'm Rachel Tepper-Paley, Digital Editorial Director at Wine Enthusiast magazine. Today we're talking with Sonal Holland, the first Indian to earn the coveted title of Master of Wine, arguably the world's highest wine qualification. She's had a front row seat to the ballooning popularity of wine in India, where a thriving economy has nurtured an increasingly affluent, middle-class urban consumer, not just thirsty for wine, but eager to learn about it as well. In this episode, we talk to Sonal about the evolution of wine's perception in the world's fifth largest economy and where India's wine scene is headed. Sonal, thanks so much for being here with us today.
Of course, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about your lengthy resume. What are you up to right now? What are your titles?
Okay, well, I'm Sonal Holland. I'm India's first Master of Wine, and I became one in 2016. And I am, as of yet, India's only Master of Wine. I am the director and founder of Soho Wines Consulting, which is a consulting company where we provide advisory services to international companies looking to enter India. I'm also the founder of Sonal Holland Academy, through which we provide world-class wine and spirits education to hospitality professionals and enthusiasts. And I'm the founder and chairperson of the India Wines and Spirits Award, which is India's largest blind tasting competition of both in-market wines and spirits.
Let's go a little bit back in time. I want to hear about how you first got into wine. Were you inspired by someone or something? And I'm curious, how unusual at the time was that for you to be into wine?
We'll have to go back 18 years. And 18 years ago, when I was 33 years old, I was working for a NASDAQ-listed Fortune 500 company. And a time came when I felt the need to reinvent my career. So I quit my job and I was looking for options of what else I could do with my life and how I could reinvent my career. Till one day, my British husband, he showed me an article written in the Financial Times, which was written by none other than our favorite Jancis Robinson. And as I read about Jancis and her career trajectory, it kind of gave me hope that a bright future was possible for wine and wine professionals in India too. Now, don't forget, I'm talking about a time when the industry was very, very nascent and there were no qualified wine professionals in the country. So it was quite a futuristic stance on my part to decide to pursue this subject. But one thing was clear. I wanted to build my career on the solid foundation of knowledge and credentials. So, and I knew nothing about wine at the time. So, and there were no means to study about wine in India. So my option was to fly to London. And I did some of my early stages of education from the Wine and Spirits Education Trust up to the point where I finished their flagship course, which is Diploma in Wines and Spirits. And in this journey, I kind of discovered my passion for wine. I kind of fell in love with wine as a subject. And I also realized that I had a flair for communicating about it. So that sort of inspired me to go on and then apply for the Master of Wine program at the Institute of Masters of Wine. And, at the time when I decided to do this, I think I was kind of way ahead of my time because wine was still a very nascent and incredibly niche industry. And it was far from gaining any global acknowledgement, both as a wine market and as a wine producer. So I don't think anyone was sitting there thinking, oh, let's have an MW from India. But somehow there was a voice inside of me that said, no, this can be something real. And I was confident that wine would have a bright future in India. And when that clicked in my head, I just decided to give it a go. And then, 10 years of studying eventually got me the title in 2016.
I'm so curious because, in wine, so many people are raised in families that love wine. I myself did not grow up in a family that loved wine. I came to it as an adult, and I'm always so curious to hear other people's stories. What was it about wine that first spoke to you? as an adult, I assume, having not grown up around it?
So for me, it was just the fact that I saw the opportunity in front of me at the time. I saw it more as a strategic decision to enter the wine industry because it was a very nascent industry. It was untapped. I could see that it was going to grow, and there were no qualified wine professionals in the country. And when I sort of extrapolated all this information, I kind of felt that the future for wine, as well as wine professionals in this country, could be very bright. So if I went on to gain some qualifications, I could perhaps be somebody known in the industry in India for my wine knowledge or my ability to communicate about it. And it would allow me an opportunity to educate, consult, do events, and pretty much all the activities that I'm pursuing today as a wine professional. It's just that I foresaw it ahead of its time in India. And I was fortunate enough to, I suppose, be at the right place, right time,
Wow.
doing the right thing.
So it really was like it started almost like a business decision, but then I imagine you fell in love with it.
As I went along, the journey, I kind of fell in love with wine, and my love for wine grew during my educational days when I traveled through vineyards in the different wine regions of the world. And a lot of this happened while I was studying for my diploma in wines and spirits from the WSET, and thereafter while I was pursuing the Master of Wine title. And during this time and through all these travels, I met hundreds of winemakers, producers, to learn about their craft, to discover their passion, and of course, tasting hundreds and thousands of wines for practice. And that's when I realized that actually the journey of learning about wine is much more important than actually reaching a goalpost, which is earning a title or, earning some accolade like that. So that really shaped me. That really shaped me and made my love and my passion for wine grow. The other thing that actually shaped me also is that I saw the enormous opportunity to apply this knowledge in a country where wine was a promising category, but yet, no one knew much about it because I'm talking from a country where spirits lead the consumption by far. So I had a very unique voice in a virgin territory, you could say almost. And so I used all my experiences that I could to launch various initiatives, be they in education or consulting or events or collaborating with trade fairs like Vinexpo and consulting for airlines and whatnot, but just sort of shaping the market and helping boost wine's popularity and its appeal by doing initiatives that had an impact is what has been very exciting and has been part of what has shaped my journey.
I think that's so much of like why we wanted to talk to you because we've been hearing just a lot of news out of India, a country that historically has not been associated with like a robust wine culture. We're hearing a lot about, wine consumption in India on the uptick, wines made in India, a lot of also very high end Indian restaurants in the United States, specifically New York, that have these beautiful beverage programs that highlight a lot of Indian wines in addition to other, Indian flavors. So, I feel like we have sort of a sense of where India's wine scene was. Where is it now? How would you describe the wine scene in India in 2025?
So, just to sort of set the background, when I joined this industry 2 decades ago, wine was largely an elitist drink. It was barely present in retail stores. And most of the fine wines that we talk about were either hand carried to India by wealthy travelers or was available only through luxury hotels. So, by and large, it was inaccessible to the general public. The early drinkers of wine in India were typically rich people who either dined at these luxury restaurants or traveled abroad frequently. And they only knew how to flash certain names like, I only drink French wines from Bordeaux or Champagne or Chateauneuf du Pape. However, they had no knowledge or not much knowledge of wines. And like I said earlier, there were no qualified wine professionals in the country. In terms of women consumption as well, it was sort of lagging behind. Just a handful of women in the high society would sort of take to wine because they were the ones who had the access and had some level of Western sensibility or had studied overseas and, had experienced the wine culture there. And at the time, there were just a handful of wine producers in the country. like Sula and Grover Vineyards, who were sort of making wines, and wine's popularity was rising. But today, things are much, much more different. Wine today has proved to become a more mainstream drink. It is seen more as a symbol of health, sophistication, success. And if you think about this charm of the three words that I just said, the health, success, and sophistication, wine is one drink that enjoys this trilogy of appeal. And that has really helped it popularize among Indians' urban and aspirational consumer base. Retail of wines has also taken off. Our retail has gone from being a more primitive picture to a more modern, sort of sophisticated, boutique, wine led retail outlets. And nearly 70% of the wine consumption in India today is through the retail sector. So only 30% of wine comes from the on premise, on trade sales. And the modern Indian wine consumer today is much more educational, far more aspirational. The growth of wine is also being led by women consumers. And mind you, that's not to be taken lightly, because half of India is women. I mean, India has 750 million women. So it's not a demographic clearly to be ignored. And they are taking and they're embracing wine in a big, big way. And Indian wineries also today are making, or striving rather, to make better wines. And they really are dominating consumption. Like 6 out of 10 bottles in India that get consumed are actually Indian wines. And some top names among these are Sula Vineyards, Grover Vineyards, and Fratelli Wines. These are the three market leaders, and among many other, boutique labels that are also now selling in India.
Tell me what you're seeing in terms of the quality of the wine. How would you describe it?
I have now been tasting Indian wines every year for the past 2 decades, and I have seen a dramatic increase in the quality of Indian wines. What started out as something that was very fault ridden, it's now come to a phase where a lot of Indian wines are winning at competitions, winning in blind tastings, both internationally and within home turf. So that's a very encouraging scene to see. Uh, I must also say that a lot of Indian wineries are making wines for the Indian audiences. They recognize the style, the palate of the Indian consumer, and they really want to make wines that are simple to interpret on the palate. That is what represents a vast majority of wines. So they are everyday drinking, and may I dare say, even simple wines. But that works. That works because India is also at a very early stage of their wine drinking journey. However, every winery that is worth its salt also has a premium offering. And today they are taking the effort to pick grapes from some of the most premium parcels of their land, leave no expense or leave no expense spared, and actually make some high quality wines that they're proud of, and claim that these are wines that are age worthy. Like, I just had an Indian wine which was 8 years old, and it was drinking beautifully. It had a lot of energy in it, and it was very encouraging to try that expression. So 80% or 90% of the Indian wines are simple, everyday drinking, quaffable wines made for early consumers who are new in their journey and are still trying to understand what wine is, and are probably just having their first few glasses of wine. Okay, because that's what the market is. We're talking about a population of 1.4 billion people. So you can imagine the opportunity for a domestic wine producer. Most Indian wine producers don't really care about exporting their wines, because they had a big enough market within India. So when they talk about exports, it's really just for prestige value. It's just to be able to put on a resume that, oh, our wines are also exported to US, UK, wherever. Yeah. But they recognize that Indian wines probably will remain just a novelty item, just something to pique people's curiosity. But they have a massive domestic market, and that's what they're aiming for. The premium wines are obviously to aim for somebody who's more evolving in his journey and is now seeking better quality wines. And the risk is that he might actually switch to drinking international wines or imported wines from other countries. So the premium wines made in India then cater to those kind of people, who are seeking a better quality now that they've understood it. You know, so that's a
It's
long answer. Sorry to your
No, it's really fascinating.
question.
I mean, it's I think it's rare that you get to see um, not just a nascent industry, but a nascent industry with such growth potential. I don't
Yes.
think you could say that about lots of other newer wine regions in the world that are also exciting, but it's not they have a consumer base like that
Yes. Yes.
available to
And I'll
them.
tell you one more very encouraging thing, which is that Indians generally, as culturally, we're very civilized people. We are very education focused. We're all well educated people. English is very mainstream, so language is never a barrier for communicating about wine. So what I mean to say is that when we take to wine also, we do it in a very civilized fashion. I've had a lot of wine producers, export managers come here, host dinners. And often, in comparison to travels to other countries, they've said to me that I find India a very civilized country to present my wines in because everyone's very appreciative. They give the respect. They're not abusing the drink. They're not just being casual about it. They're really keen and they understand that this is a drink that we must enjoy and they almost over intellectualize it, if I may dare say. But the point is that we're very respectful about wine. I mean, so that I think presents a massive opportunity for the world to showcase its wines in India because India will embrace wine in all its glory and more.
You mentioned that, the scene is really led, like education is a very strong theme. Is that something that really excites you about what's happening in India right now?
As a professional, what really excites me is that in the 2 decades, never before now have I seen so much interest in the Indian wine market. I think it is at an all time high. And every international wine producer and exporter I speak to, they really want a piece of India on their portfolio. And they're very keen to export their wines into India, even if it's in small quantities. They don't care. But they really want to be able to say that I sell wines in India. So India no longer is like this third world country. It's a fast emerging market and it's on everyone's sort of bucket list. And that truly excites me because as a consulting business that presents us enormous and innumerable opportunities to work with these producers and exporters, helping them navigate the Indian market, helping them understand the structure of taxes, which is still, by the way, quite dense and quite complicated. So that presents a great opportunity for us. The other thing that really thrills me and excites me about the Indian wine scene is that there's so much thirst for wine knowledge. We have a massive population. I mean, we're the most populous country in the world, but people are really curious about wine. They want to really learn about it. And I'm really proud that through our academy, but also through our vast social media presence, we now have an opportunity to educate, communicate, and inform people about wine. And we're very proud to have a following of over 1.5 million across various social media platforms, making us among one of the most followed accounts for wine education. And we are constantly finding that people are really curious to learn about wine, understand the etiquette and the culture around it, and they're constantly asking us questions about this, which keeps encouraging us to do more. And that to me is the most exciting thing at the moment.
I'm also curious on your thoughts about India as an emerging market, especially in light of the political turmoil happening in the world right now, specifically about tariffs with the United States. I imagine that the United States, for many producers outside the United States now presents a less attractive opportunity. But India is an emerging market. Do you see that conversation happening?
I can speak about this at a regulatory level, but I can also speak about this at a personal level. We've been doing a lot of work with Californian wines over the past couple of years, about 2 to 3 years. And I have to say, from the earlier times when I felt USA overall did not take India as a serious market and did not want to invest, in the past three years or so, we've seen that change. And we've seen a lot of interest coming from the Californian wine trade towards growing the presence of Californian wines in India. And we've had the pleasure and the honor of working very closely with the trade and the consulates of USA to help promote through various initiatives, be they trade tastings, consumer dinners, and tastings and social media promotions, education. We've actually put you'll be surprised, but we've actually put close to 2,000 professionals in India through the California education program, which is called the Capstone California. I think the recent changes in the tariff structures and the back and forth, or what's the word I want to use, but the tug of war that's being played around the taxation between America and India is rather unfortunate, because just today I got the news that UK has is almost on the final stages of signing off their trade agreement with India, an economic cooperation trade agreement. And 2 years ago, Australia became the first country to sign off such a bilateral trade agreement, making the price of Australian wines considerable lower as compared to wines from other countries. So, whatever it is, I think if you are asking me specifically about USA, they should be able to sort their differences and move forward positively. Because I know that the Indian government actually appears to be keen to make such trade agreements come through as long as they are a win-win situation. And this is something India needs, because our taxes on wine and alcohol as a whole are still very high. We have 150% import tax, and there are many other state level taxes that actually make the price of wine very expensive by the time it reaches the consumer. So all of this needs to soften. It needs to deregulate a little bit, so that wine can continue to grow in momentum and its popularity.
And obviously, I am sure, you see it as a tremendous business opportunity in India.
Yes, but business is one thing, and business has been great. I mean, we've been growing and we've been having lots of fun. But more importantly, it's a purpose, right? I always think of it like that. That if I've become India's first master of wine, and I've had the privilege of being its only for the past 9 years, so almost a decade now, every success also comes with a responsibility. And my thought and my thinking is always about how can I make meaningful contributions that serve the industry well, that propel its growth, that actually serve its stakeholders in a meaningful way. And so my thinking has always been shaped around this. Whatever the opportunity, I kind of ask myself, is this a favorable move, not just for me, but as an industry as a whole? And is this going to make a meaningful contribution to the industry? And if I find the answer a resounding yes, then I kind of move forward. But the lucky part also in this whole consideration is that when, as a wine professional, most of our initiatives have been pioneering only because India is such a new market for wine that most things were lacking. So when we started the academy, it was like the first academy. We were the first to launch world-class wine and wine education here. When we started the awards, it was the first wine awards in the country. The first kind of you know what I mean? Like we've just had the great opportunity and the honor of launching a lot of pioneering initiatives. And whilst that all sounds very glamorous and fun, let me tell you, it's also a lot of hard work, because when the good thing about saying I'm a pioneer is you get the glory, a slice of the glory. But the hard work really is that you have to build a market. And many times we've found ourselves hitting against the wall and asking ourselves, oh, I thought there was a gap in the market for this, but is there a market in the gap? And you have to really build a market. And so many times, I've faced failures as well. There's many things I started in the past 2 decades. Not all of them succeeded, but what's important is that you keep trying. You keep the hustle, and you try different things. And in some places you stick the landing, and in some places you kind of move on.
What do you think changed in the Indian market to encourage more people to embrace wine? What shifted?
So, firstly, India is a thriving economy at the moment, and we are really the fifth. Currently, India is the world's fifth largest economy, and we're on a track to becoming the third largest by the year 2030. We really are growing as an economy, and premiumization is on the upswing, which means that people are trading up in homes, better clothing, better travel, everything. And so wine perfectly fits in that entire repertoire of increased spending. And so Indians have really developed an affinity for an aspirational lifestyle in which wine perfectly fits into that narrative. Now, there's a lot of rapid urbanization. People are really sort of moving into the urban cities for a better lifestyle. They're being continuously exposed to the Western lifestyle through their own travel, through pop culture, through the OTT platforms that we are exposed to. So all of this is, further contributing to wine's popularity, because if you see on any OTT, if I see any Netflix sort of a show, people are either having a glass of scotch or they're also having a lot of wine. Wine's become very mainstream, even as an imagery. We're constantly seeing the image of wine around us, and wine is also making a very steady appearance in Hindi in our Bollywood movies. So wine is being seen very favorably, and this is all shaping consumer choices, particularly among the urban middle class consumers. And not to forget, India has a thriving domestic wine industry as well. Oh, and we're making some amount of wine that is somehow getting distributed uh, properly across all cities. So all of this is kind of making wine a more accessible and a popular drink in India.
Tell me a little bit about the average Indian consumer's palate. Is it similar from mainstream Western drinking habits?
So the Indian consumer palate is very unique, and it doesn't necessarily align with the Western drinkers' palate. For instance, consumers in UK, they prefer to drink white wine, despite it being such a cold country. Something that I've never understood. But equally, what I do not understand is why Indians drink so much red wine. In India, red wine is favored much, much more by a far margin as compared to white wines. And so nearly 65% of the total consumption of wine today is driven by the consumption of red wine. And why? Because people prefer the taste of red wines. There is generally a positive imagery around red wine. So when people think of wine, they think of red. And of course, there are still some perceived health benefits around wine, which are popularly propelled by the media fraternity. Secondly, the Western culture I see is kind of moving towards lighter styles of wines. You know, we like our wines to be light and elegant and not necessarily very heavy. But in India, people still prefer full bodied red wines. So, wines made from Cabernet Sauvignon or Shiraz, which are rich, opulent, deep colored, they are very, very popular. And people generally tend to associate deeper colored wines and more extracted wines with higher quality while they're still learning what really means in what quality in wine really means. Consumers worldwide are moving towards low alcohol wines, but in India, I'm not seeing any such clear movement. There are sporadic preferences for low alcohol and no alcohol wines, but in general, we are still in very early stages. And people really in India don't mind high alcohol in wines because we are a spirit drinking country where alcohol levels are much, much higher. So even if we are talking about a wine that has 15% alcohol, we're still seeing this as a low alcohol beverage as compared to spirits. And I would say one more thing could possibly be the whole concept about food and wine pairing. Like in the Western culture, food and wine pairing is a very big deal. Much is written and talked about it. And whilst in India, people are fascinated by this subject and they're curious about it and they want to learn about the right pairings and how to pair wine with food, they're not necessarily focused on food and wine pairing in order to enjoy wine. I think wine is seen more as a social drink and something to have a good conversation around, but people aren't that fussed about a proper paired meal. In any case, we Indians love our food so much that once the food comes, we forget about everything else, including wine. So I try and not make a big deal about food and wine in India.
Mm. I wonder if part of that is, it is a big deal in the West pairing food and wine. I also think that like the descriptors, the words that, in mainstream, wine writing, it's very Western. It's very ethnocentric. You know, do you find that that is sort of impacting wine education in India? Do you have to tweak things to better fit the Indian consumer?
Yeah, well, you're reminding me of days when I used to study because I remember a lot of the terminologies, wine tasting terms, particularly aromas and flavors. I would have some difficulty with them because I would often not understand what licorice tasted like or pear fruits or not pear fruits, but no, pear drops. I'm sorry. There was some, a word called pear drops and I could never understand what they smelled like. So I had some trouble even as a student But in India, I have to say that we've tried to make wine more accessible to a larger demographic and people from all socioeconomic strata across the country. For example, on social media, you may see that I not only make videos in English, but we've also successfully made videos in regional languages like Hindi and Marathi. And the whole idea is to make wine more inclusive, and we speak in regional languages. So obviously, when we speak in these languages, we use the words, of that language. And so we're not necessarily using English words at all. And the whole idea is to make wine accessible to a wider audience, to make it more affable, less intimidating, and to make it relatable. The other thing is, I know I just said a minute ago that I do not talk much about food and wine pairing, but in the few videos that we've made, for example, if I was talking about something like a pairing of champagne, I would never say pair champagne with caviar, only because caviar is not a mainstream dish eaten on an everyday basis in India. I'm sure it's not in the UK, US either. But my point is, it's much more relatable there as opposed to here. A very small section of people have access to caviar here. But when we talk about pairing of champagne, we would talk about pairing it with an Indian dish like pakoras, which are Indian fritters. And that would be a fantastic pairing. Or we could talk about pairing a Saint Emilio red wine with a dal, a lentil dal makhani, which is a staple in Indian households. So when we talk like that, rather than change words of aromas and flavors and descriptors, if you just kind of integrate wine into an average Indian person's life through his food and through his language and through his the way he understands it, then that to my mind is the best way to integrate wine into somebody's life and make it accessible to one and all.
Love that. What do you see on the horizon for the Indian wine scene? Any trends that are bubbling up?
Um, so there's lots going on, but apart from everything that I have just mentioned, I would say one segment that's popularizing rapidly is wine tourism. People are fascinated. See, Indians have always been very well traveled people. And a lot of them, when they go overseas now as well, they want to explore vineyards of Tuscany or vineyards of Bordeaux and Champagne. I get a lot of calls from people saying, we're going to XYZ country. Can you facilitate introductions for us in those countries? But equally, wine tourism in India is growing. So there are lots of vineyards and wineries that are now promoting memorable experiences that go far beyond just tasting. And Maharashtra, where I'm sitting, the state of Maharashtra where I'm sitting, which is the India's wine capital or the wine hub, is actually leading the charge with such immersive tours and events that are focused around wine tasting. And a lot of these wine tasting happens in Nashik. So Nashik is a small town within Maharashtra, which is widely known as the wine capital of India, and that's where 70% of India's wineries are. And so a lot of those are happening. One interesting thing that I also wanted to share here is that I've recently unveiled a property called the Holland House. And I've kind of made it tastefully, designed it tastefully, built it from scratch, and with a few influences of like a French chateau. So tried to make it look a little bit like a French chateau inspired mansion, but it is in Nashik. And this is going to be aiming at providing 360-degree wine experiences to consumers, visitors, people who will come and stay with us. And so we've seen our guests show immense interest in wine experiences. So we are organizing sommelier led wine tastings, high end wine dinners, visits to nearby wineries, all of this, because we're seeing a cultural shift where wine is now part of a larger experience for consumers. And through the Holland House, we want to try and seamlessly integrate this cultural shift, and make wine accessible to one and all. Yeah.
I'm curious of the wine that is produced in India. What are the varieties? What are the styles? Can you compare them to other regions, or is it a completely unique style of wine?
No, so you'll be pleased to know that a lot of the grape varieties that are grown in India are actually the noble varieties. In reds, we're talking about Cabernet Sauvignon, Shiraz, a little bit of Merlot. There's a bit of Tempranillo as well, some Sangiovese. So all popular, well-known grape varieties. Thankfully, we're not trying to make a Malbec like from Argentina or trying to make a Carmenere like from Chile. We're not trying to make our indigenous grape variety. And I genuinely say thank God for that, because that would really take us 10 more decades to ever be able to popularize wine from India. So at least we're sticking with the mainstream varieties. In terms of styles, we're pretty much making it all. Every winery in India makes a sparkling wine. Although we use different grape varieties, we tend to make a white sort of a sparkling wine from Chenin Blanc and a red sparkling wine with Shiraz, actually.
Is that
Um,
traditional
yeah.
method? Is that
Yes, because
uh
no, well, some are doing the Sharma method, and some
mhm.
are claiming to do the traditional method. And I say this cautiously because I haven't been inside the wineries to see for sure, but they're claiming to do traditional methods. And we make some lovely rosés, and rosé is really trending. Since you asked me earlier, one thing that aligns with the Western culture actually is the massive popularization of rosé wines. We've really taken to our rosés, and that's really growing in popularity. Reds remains the most dominant style consumed in India, and like I said earlier, Indians really prefer their red wines to be rich, full-bodied, opulent, extracted, deep-colored, because that's associated with higher quality. So the grape varieties most commonly grown in India are Shiraz. Shiraz is the number one in reds, and Cabernet Sauvignon, a little bit of Merlot. And in the whites, we have Sauvignon Blanc, we have Chenin Blanc, we have a tiny bit of Riesling, and yeah, that would be about it.
Well, it sounds really exciting. Is there anything else that you would want people to know about the Indian wine scene?
What I would like to say about India is that we're in a very exciting phase right now where consumption of alcohol as a whole is really growing. And wine is also among the big beneficiaries of that upward moving trend. Wine is the fastest growing beverage in India today, and it's increasingly becoming mainstream and is a prominent feature today in people's homes, at corporate dinners, at Indian weddings, which, by the way, is a massive industry. And India is also very successfully entering into free trade agreements with various countries, starting with Australia, now UK, US, and I'm sure Europe will follow suit. So all of this combined, really will ensure a bigger and a brighter future for wine in the Indian market. For those few people who wish to do business in India, I've often felt that people suffer from some past experience syndrome. Like I've heard people say, oh, we tried to enter India, or we tried to do this business in India 10 years ago, and it didn't work out. And that's kind of left a sour taste in our mouth. And I would like to just say that India has changed a lot in the past decade. We're changing every day. We're a very fast moving economy. So, I would urge people to look at India with a fresh pair of lenses, reevaluate opportunities, and start over, because it's a bus you want to get on. You don't want to miss the bus. And for the consumers who love wines, I would say come visit India, not just to drink Indian wine, of course, but just to witness the growing wine culture of in India, but of course to also enjoy the beautiful tourism, to have our wonderful food, and to witness a revolution that's taking place in India overall, but also with wine.
Amazing. Well, I'm excited. Thank you so much for chatting with us today. This has really been very interesting.
Thank you. I've really had lots of fun. So, again, thank you for having me on this show.
Were you surprised to learn about wine's rising profile in India? Tell us about it at podcast@wineenthusiast.net, and we might share your feedback on the podcast. We love hearing from you and appreciate your support. Please rate and review us wherever you listen to podcasts. Remember to visit us at wineenthusiast.com for content and products that bring your love of wine to life.